Open heart, open mind. I welcome you all to the Sattva channel, which is an official online platform of the Sattva project. Myself Samiksha.
And I'm Sanika Gupta, one of the newest members of Sattva Youth. I'm a student of grade 11 based out of Bangalore, India.
Okay. So, before beginning with our discussion, let me thanks our streamer sponsor and media partners during Asian and during FM for their constant and kind support. And there is one more person who manages all the technicalities in the background, our broadcast director, Brother Chong. Brother Chong, would you like to say hi to our audience, please?
Hi, everyone. Very good evening and welcome to our broadcast. Please do like and share so that more people can benefit today. And for those watching in YouTube, you may also like, share, and subscribe. And now back to you, ladies.
Thank you, Brother Chong. Okay, so begin with our discussion. This will be our part two of Noble Tara series, Women, Buddhism and Psychology. Moving forward, first of all, we would like to introduce you our panelists of tonight discussion.
Our moderator for today's discussion is Sister Smita Lahiri. Having spent over 20 years in the technology industry, Smita decided to give it up and dedicate more time to her Dharma journey. After finding some precious teachers and attending several retreats, she decided to undertake structured study of Dharma. She recently graduated with a diploma in Buddhist philosophy with the Nalanda tradition from Tibet House, Delhi. She is currently on the board of Tashi Getzel Ling Buddhist Center in Maine and works closely with Venerable Dasel. During her corporate tenure, she was on the advisory board for the Grace Hopper Conference for Women in Technology and worked passionately for the cause. She was a counselor for cancer patients and their caregivers, something that helped her immensely in her Dharma practice. Smitaji is based in Bangalore, India. Thank you so much for being here and moderating this discussion.
Our first contributor of tonight's discussion is Venerable Tenzin Dasel. Venerable Tenzin Dasel is a teacher and leader who has been practicing Buddhism and meditation for over 2 decades. She is the founder of Main Mindfulness Project and serves as the Buddhist spiritual advisor at Bates College and the spiritual program coordinator at Tasi Getzel Buddhist Center. She holds many honors and distinctions for her work with women, children, and youth throughout the US, India, and the world. It's an honor to have you, Venerable, in the discussion.
My pleasure to be here with everybody. Good moment to everyone, wherever you are tuning in from, and looking forward to a very fruitful exploration of this topic.
Sure.
Thank you. Our next contributor is Sister Tripti Lochan, co-CEO Asia VMLY&R. Tripti ji runs the Asia region for VMLY&R, a global brand and customer experience agency with over 12,800 employees and more than $2 billion in annual revenue. Tripti ji manages diverse markets across Asia and is responsible for the strategy and growth of her organization. Regularly sought for her opinions on all matters marketing, Tripti judges award shows like the Effies and AMES, speaks at diverse conferences including keynotes at AdTech and Forrester, and writes opinion pieces in Campaign Asia, Business Insider, and CMO.com. Tripti is a Buddhist, and her Dharma journey started with the Vipassana retreat that sparked her thirst to learn more about Buddhism in 2009. She has completed the Nalanda Diploma program in Buddhist philosophy from Tibet House, taught by Geshe Dorji Dambulla, and is in the second year studying loading of a 3-year logic and debate course taught by Atisha Mathur at ILTK. She knows that these are the very first steps of her journey. It's a pleasure to have you here with us today, Prithvi.
Thank you so much, Santa. I'm really looking forward to our discussions.
Thank you. Our next contributor is Andreea Payne. Andreea was introduced to Vajrayana Buddhism and breath meditation in 2014, and her practice grows strong to date. Originally, she is from Romania. Andreea moved to Maine, USA in 2013. Her journey exposed her what are now many of her loves, that is philosophy, poetry, history and mythology, the study of psychology, religions and spirituality. and the arts that weave the tapestry of our experience. Andreea gets to play at the intersection of many groups while growing a full-time technology career. You can find her involved in several community organizations. She is a jury panelist for Maine Outdoor Film Festival. Her engagement with Tasi Gatseling Buddhist Center culminated with her support in setting their nonprofit grounds and online programming. She currently is serving on the board of directors at Maine Jung Center for Depth Psychology and Analytical Studies. A warm welcome, Dr. Andrea Payne.
Good morning, everyone here from Maine. I cannot claim the title of that of doctor, but I am certainly honored and humbled by all of my fellow panelists today, and I appreciate your curiosity in inviting my eclectic background to this conversation.
Thank you so much. Our final contributor on this esteemed panel is Dr. Lydia Brown, a clinical psychologist, resilience researcher, and mindfulness teacher. She holds academic positions at the University of Melbourne and La Trobe University, and completed postdoctoral training at Harvard Medical School. She's fascinated by how people can use mindfulness and compassion-based techniques to cope with life's challenges. Her research in this area has been covered in the media internationally, including the Chicago Tribune, the ABC, and Reuters Health. Prior to training to be a psychologist, she spent many months living in a Buddhist monastery in the hills above Kandy in Sri Lanka, where she learned Buddhist meditation. She draws on this personal training in meditation, as well as her knowledge of the science, to deliver workshops and public talks. As an international advisory board member to Headspace, one of the world's leading mindfulness meditation apps, she helps shape global trends in mindfulness and well-being practices. She shares their mission to improve the health and happiness of the world. Thank you so much for being here with us today, ma'am.
Thank you, Sanika, and it's lovely to be a part of the discussion today. I'm looking forward very much to the conversation and to hearing everybody's perspectives.
Thank you. As we have got all the panelists on the screen, so we hand over this discussion to Smita ji. So please continue.
Oh wow, what a panel. It's indeed, I going to be a very long and fruitful discussion, I hope, for all our listeners out there. I welcome all our viewers who have tuned in today and all our esteemed panelists for another episode of this conversation that we had last time, women's psychology and Buddhism. I think, the last conversation was really eye-opening, and we hope to uncover more layers of the topic in today's series. For those of you who are new to the series by Sattva for All, we've so far had conversations on empowering Buddhist women here and now. The topics we choose as part of this series are aimed at helping all of us, introspecting, empowering us, and helping us in our Dharma journey. I would like to point out here that while we grow through today's conversation, we would like our audience to know that we do not want to make any stereotypes or any attempts at, stereotyping women or men in general. And we really look forward to having a generally open and holistic conversation. So it enables all of us listening in today. If you haven't watched part one, I'd strongly urge you to go and check out our YouTube channel and listen in. For today, we have two new panelists joining in the conversation. So we'll begin today's conversation with some opening comments from them. So I just came across a quote of His Holiness, and I quote, "I call on the next generation of young women to be the mothers of the revolution of compassion that this century so desperately needs. You have a special role to play in creating a better world. Women are more empathetic and sensitive, more receptive to the feelings of others. These qualities make women models of humanity. Study history and you'll see that it's men who have been responsible for carnage and destruction." So with that, I'll go to Dr. Lydia. What are your thoughts on what His Holiness has said? Are women really more empathetic, sensitive, and compassionate?
Well, first, I think that these qualities are, they don't really have a gender. I think of compassion as a very natural inclination of the heart and of the mind to, whenever the heart is open, I think that it's very natural to have a wish to heal or to help if we see somebody, another being, suffering. So compassion, this seeing suffering and wishing to help, it doesn't have a gender. But when you measure compassion in scales, if you ask people to complete a questionnaire on compassion, women tend to score a little bit higher on those scales. So that shows that women might have more compassion measured sort of using a psychological questionnaire than men. One of the reasons we think maybe this is coming up in scales is that from a very young age, women are often conditioned to care for others. Like a young baby girl is given a doll to nurture and care for, whereas a boy might be given an action toy for his birthday, and he's sort of more into kind of being very sort of physical. Or even fighting. So from early ages, these types of conditionings can really have a big impact. But when you measure self-compassion, so this is how we relate to our own experience of suffering and how we feel about ourselves, women actually tend to score a little lower than men. So while women are very good at being kind to others and compassionate to others, we're not so good at bending our compassion inwards to care for our own experience of suffering. So I think that's really interesting, that imbalance there. It's also an opportunity. But what a wonderful call for action that His Holiness the Dalai Lama said. One other point about this that comes to mind is stress responses. So we do know that when women get stressed, they're more likely to have a tend and befriend response, which is seeking out others, talking through their stress, reaching out for social connections. Men, this again, it's not so much a stereotype, but it's more a tendency of what we find when we look at gender differences. Men are more likely to have like a fight or flight response. So again, there might be evolutionary reasons for why these different responses happen. But again, it's just another example how women can be a little bit more wired towards human connection. But on the other hand, compassion really doesn't have a gender, and men and women have equal capacity to experience compassion, in my view, at least.
Yeah, that's very, very, very well articulated. I think, the way you pulled out that the qualities in themselves don't have a gender, right? And women have tendencies to demonstrate these qualities while in a testing environment or even otherwise. And interestingly, you pointed out that self-compassion is something, and I think I saw some people nodding, is one place women really struggle with, right? And that is, I think, very, very well pointed out. But I think it gave me some points for introspection as well. And I'm sure some of you on the panel as well felt the same. Andrea, what are your thoughts on the same quote, or that women being more compassionate or demonstrate more compassion from a Jungian perspective?
Sure. Thank you for the question. In sitting and listening to Dr. Brown, I'm realizing that the common thread for I guess I'm stating the obvious, that the common thread for us all here on the panel is the fertile soil, the fertile ground of the Dharma and our Buddhist practices. And certainly from there, we're here to shoot branches into other spaces that we may have expertise of some sort. So from a Jungian perspective, and I get to speak of this not as an analyst, but as someone who is very intimately connected to a Jungian group here in Maine and in touch with a lot of programming. So in that sense, and I should maybe preface for the audience that may not be familiar with Carl Jung, he was a Swiss psychoanalyst and psychiatrist, and he is very well known for his relationship, his student-teacher relationship with Freud. And in that sense, they built a dialectical dyad, I would say, up to a point that created a split. So that split, that point of tension between the two of them had to do with the topic of unconscious. So they, in depth psychology, there's this concept of consciousness and the conscious and the unconscious. And for Freud, the unconscious had to do in great part with the libido, while for Jung, that became something much more expansive. And so that caused a rift to such an extent that Jung fell into a deep depression and severed all relations with Freud at the time. And that offered him fertile soil to really bring forward and birth what we know now to be the Jungian school of thought. And so there, I'm trying to get back to your question, Smita, around women and compassion and kind of the degree to which women may experience this more than men. And I have so much to say here because my cosmogony is built upon other things outside of Jungian school of thought, such as the non-duality in Buddhism, but certainly from a sociological perspective, we see um, a non-binary community flourish, right? We're talking about gender fluidity today. So very much agreeing with what Dr. Brown said around these qualities are not connected to gender, yet they manifest in interesting ways and they constellate in different ways. So I just wanted to also offer this to help us kind of expand outside of even the duality of female and male. So back to Jung, I would point out that I two interesting, well, one dyad that is very interesting that he brings forward, which comes from ancient Greece, is the concept of animus and anima. So animus for Jung in the word actually comes from Latin, and it has to do with the mind, with courage, and with desire, while anima has to do with soul, spirit, even breath. So I think already just sitting with these two and kind of balancing those out, I think we're hearing mindfulness, we're hearing breath with the anima, and with the animus, we're hearing the mind. So I think again, just kind of this play on dyads, this and that, masculine and feminine. So to offer even more, to put even more meat to the bone, I suppose the animus is meant to be an archetype of the unconscious that shows up in women. This is what Jung says. So it is, this may show up in your dreams, for example, or a manifestation of your unconscious where you have this masculine trait, masculine kind of force come through that helps you become whole, I suppose. And I'm saying this with a smile because certainly we can take this and talk so much along this line alone. And then the opposite stands for men having the anima or the feminine principle show up in the unconscious um, to also help with the individuation process, which I'll extrapolate at a later time in our discussion today. And so back to your question, we're already seeing threads being also pointed out by Jung that I would say are quite similar to Buddhism. And we do know that Jung has manifested great interest in the Eastern traditions overall. So.
Thank you for those opening comments, Andrea. It's very interesting to know this facet of psychology where you see that everybody presents two aspects or to a personality, the masculine and the feminine. And I'm sure you'll explain more in detail as we go along. I'll go to Venerable Dasel now, and wanted to hear from her in several retreats and listening to several teachers. We often hear that women make more progress in their meditation retreats, right? A recent study from Brown University showed that women benefit more from mindfulness meditation than men do. And compared with men, women show greater decrease in the negative effect of emotions like guilt or irritability, and greater increases in mindfulness. So essentially, these practices seem to benefit women more, and as per this study, I'm saying. And so, what might explain this? What do you think might explain this from your perspective?
Well, frankly, I have no idea, but it's good news. What I want to say is, anytime anyone benefits from mindfulness, given the chance, what I would say from my perspective is this: from as a layperson practitioner of Buddhism for over 20 years, and before that, as someone who's traveled and worked in many capacities, that the mind, when I came to Buddhism, it was really the curiosity of mind. What is mind, and how to go further in a human evolutionary journey together in the oneness of humanity. And what occurred to me was my generation, so people who are maybe 60 years and under now, so all those generations, for the first time worldwide, are the generations that see a picture of the earth floating in the space. They're the generations of girls who are being told, yes, get educated, and we're going to come and help you get educated so you can get an education. Think for yourself. Your opinion has worth, has value. Your perspective is broad. It's also deep. And, you know, responsibility of children, just in human beings, but all creatures in the mammals kingdom anyway, that Homo sapiens are a part of, are born from a female, born from a womb. In that sense, in Buddhism, we'd say we have a contaminated birth because we're not lotus born. We're not born from an enlightened place, but we have, as the Buddha said, the best opportunity to become awakened as a human being. Now, what His Holiness the Dalai Lama is saying is that in this century, in the 21st century, so historically, this is the first time that so many females actually are here. The age of females over 60 is the highest ever worldwide. The highest populations of females being educated is the highest that we've ever been aware of on this planet. And given the opportunity, I think this is what His Holiness was trying to say, is given the opportunity, he said his own best teacher of compassion was his mother, right? Because that's relational. I mean, and he's representing the bodhisattva of compassion, of Chenrezig. So his enlightened mind picks a very special female mother to come into this existence through, right? Who's going to be willing to give her child over to a system that's going to promote universal loving kindness and compassion. So you have that kind of selflessness of a mother. You have that mindfulness on a whole other level of the mindfulness of the mother recognizing qualities in her child. You have the mindfulness of the child's mind picking a very special mother to come in to do this great work on the planet with. And then dialing it back to what we practice as mindfulness now, which is just coming to know, who are we? Who are we really as our essence? What is mind? And given the opportunity for women who are so busy always attending to relationships, taking care of the social networks, to be able to come into their own awareness of who we are and that power of interconnectivity, that's mind-blowing interconnection. It's not surprising that women are going to quickly come on board, not just with the mindfulness of their true essence. I think intuitively, women already have that responsibility because of the way we interrelate, and maybe that lower sense of not knowing our real nature because we're so busy giving out. Given a chance to go into a mindfulness practice in a study and create a practice for ourselves, that is, as Dr. Lydia said, pointing that back inwards. That is going to just make the lotus blossom, because that is where the lotus is living. We all have that Buddha nature equally, men, women, all kinds of creatures. Everything that lives has a Buddha nature. But for the female human beings who are connected, especially wanting to go into Buddhism, not just mindfulness to get peace and happy and, be a better worker at work. It's not that kind of mindfulness, but the mindfulness of the essence of the existential knowing of our true nature. When women are going to take this on, that lotus is going to just blossom, And so it's not surprising that when women are starting to get more access to these practices, their beautiful lotus is just going to thrive and open. And that renunciation of samsara. So renunciation, the lotus in Buddhism is a symbol of an awakening mind, right? And the mind, the lotus grows in the muck and mud, like samsara. The world is very nasty, as His Holiness said. The men, and Dr. Lydia maybe pointed this out, boys are given toys to be active and and engage. And historically, it is true. The wars have been created through conflict, largely driven by male leaders, largely driven by aggression. Fight and then fight, and that has to change, because if that doesn't change, it won't matter who's left on the planet. If we don't change the overall mind of the planet right now, if that mindset doesn't change from the fighting into the communicating, into the dialoguing, into the networking, which is what the women we've talked about already are already very adept at socially. But if the women can cultivate that inward knowing first of their real essence, using psychology, using philosophy, that's very valid. That's pointing towards the awakened mind, not just mindfulness. It can be applied in a secular way, but it has to be taken as a very serious, sacred practice, like within the Buddhist practice, that's really about a much higher goal towards full enlightenment than just, getting a little time out of peace of mind. So I think if we can take the mindfulness in its true highest destination, wonderful. And women will benefit. And the more anyone, especially women, are benefiting, they're the ones taking care of the next generation of children. They can inculcate these techniques and these awarenesses and qualities in all their children. That's how we're going to make this higher transformation. I say the evolution of love, like the altruistic love. This is what the Buddha was talking about, right? So this is a quality we all have, and it transcends the gender. But the mindfulness is, we need to then bring the mindfulness, awareness, and great caution into what we're really here to be doing with our own precious human life.
Thank you, Venerable, for pointing that out. And it's not just using mindfulness in a secular practice, or, trying to make samsara more comfortable, I would say, but taking it for a higher purpose. So, Tripti ji, I'd call upon you to, kind of relate to what that Brown, uh, you know, studies suggested, and also comment on what Venerable Dasel just pointed out, that to drive to a larger purpose and a higher purpose, where do you see your practice and personal meditative experience going?
I think this is such a question that demands a very, very elaborate answer. So I'm trying to put that into as succinct a manner as I can. And maybe a little bit of a story behind this. I went for my first meditation practice with the Sri Goenka ji, which is the 10-day Vipassana course. This was in 2009. It was in a beautiful setting in Igatpuri, and I was on day 4, and just thought I had arrived in life, home. I thought, this is home, when I can turn inwards and find myself. And I was called away by the teacher, and she asked me a very strange question. She said, when you left home, how was your husband feeling? And I was like, that's a strange question. And I said, he was okay. I thought, it's weird. Maybe she's trying to ask me if I had permission, to be there. But turns out she was telling me in a very gentle way that my husband had had a heart attack while I was away in another country. So I live in Singapore, and I was in India in a workshop, and I don't know how I got back home. I have no recollection. I know there were people who surrounded me with love, arrangements, practicalities, flights, check-ins, and the like, picked me up and took me there. And I always think that if I had not had those 3 days of shamatha, I wouldn't have been able to cope with what was to come. Okay, so for me, the practicality of the meditation is for me to have had that acceptance of the moment that I was in, which was really, really hard, um, impossible at the time, and to have the inner quietness which I had gained in just 3 days, of just looking and watching my breath. And I just practiced it. I personally think I was given that gift to be able to cope with what was going to happen, right? So for me, meditation took a turn for a survival skill. you know, it wasn't that I started off trying to find a higher purpose, and maybe it was unknown to me. There was a path laid out in front of me, which I was starting on. But at the time, it came as a survival skill. And my husband encouraged me to go back and finish it, because I hadn't completed the study. And I've gone back every year, and he's joined me. 2 years later, he joined me for the first one, and so on. Why is that important? It's important to talk about that because whether we are men or women, we need the awareness of where we are right at the moment. And Shamatha is phenomenal in being able to give us that. But as women, and Goenkaji, used to say this a lot. He said, any family in which a woman has done meditation, you will find slowly that everybody around her also starts doing it. And I found that to be true in my case because my husband joined it. And now my daughter is talking about going to a meditation practice. And I think their networks will also expand and enable them to find this tool, the survival tool that helped me. Um, I I really think that if we can start teaching children at a younger stage just how to watch their breath, how to be present at the moment, just be present, whether they are boys or girls, it doesn't matter at that point. But if we could start putting that in right from their childhood, um, we're going to see a very different world when they grow up, to where we are today. So for me, beyond religion, beyond anything much higher, I think it's a foundational practice that has helped me tremendously in my life. And I don't know if that answers your question, Smita, directly. But just to put the perspective of what meditation meant for me and how I interpreted it.
Thank you so much. I saw Venerable Dasel nodding. You wanted to add something, Dasella?
Yes, well, I mean, Tripti, thank you for that profound sharing personally, because as a monastic, and even before that, just as a mindfulness teacher, I would say 90% of the people in retreats are female. It doesn't matter if I'm in India or in the Bahamas or in America, North America. I mean, it's just the fact that now people are getting the chance, right, to even be sitting there in the retreat, and how precious, because mind is everywhere. I loved your story of that you had just come home to yourself. So how wonderful you were, so present and able to meet then the next moment that was going to come. And when I was taking ordination, when we were doing our pre-ordination training to take our vows with His Holiness the Dalai Lama, one of my sisters who was taking the robes, she was from Australia. She is from Australia. She was preparing, and right after we took our ordination, she also had a very profoundly big personal moment happen in her life, where her mother lost her life the next day, and she just came and just gravitated. But it was because already we'd been doing that training that she could just receive and come and get what she needed. She could cry, we could help her, we could hold her, and then we could say, what do you need? And sometimes because the mind is here, right? If I say mind, we're not talking about the mindfulness of the brain, but because of the feeling, but yet the transcendental expansive quality of mind, it's non-physical. It is the deep interconnection. It is that kind of mother intuition or women's intuition that maybe men can also get that. I'm not sure, but we tend to say in English anyway, woman's intuition. So I just think your teacher coming to you and sharing that with you so preciously, right? I mean, it's amazing and it's beautiful. So whatever we can do, we can of course always use it in a secular way, and whatever, not even in any conceptual way, it's practical. But in our Buddhist practice, what I'm trying to say is, if we are really training in how much we can grow these qualities, these four immeasurable qualities that come through the mind, altruistic loving kindness, the four Brahma Viharas, altruistic compassion, endless, immeasurable mudita joy, and then immeasurable equanimity. It doesn't mean that difficulties are going to stop. That doesn't what it means. But what it's going to mean is they'll stop for us. And because they stop for us, we can be there to be not kind of having to navigate everybody's emotions and try to tell them what to feel, but our own mind, by staying calm and cool, becomes the greatest asset, not only to oneself, but to the whole collective.
Yep, well summarized there, Venerable Dasel. Andrea, you wanted to add something?
Oh, I'm just sitting with everything that's being shared, and my mind is going in so many directions. I really loved the invocation of Sister Tripti saying, let's bring this in in a training way. Let's bring this to schools. Let's educate our young to have access to this way of experiencing and considering our relative reality for now, while also contemplating on ultimate reality. And I'm thinking about Sattva Project's dedication to young women, and then I think about my own experience, having grown in post-communist Romania, and being raised by my mother, who meant nothing but my success, and wanting to give me all the good advice that she could fathom in the moment. And her advice was, you make sure that you stay safe by not being too opinionated. It's really kind of I guess still a patriarchal take on how to move in the world as a young woman so you can stay safe. And that, I had years in the making of unlearning that, and being okay and kind of resolving my own cognitive dissonance and dissociation for what I have to do. And here I am on this panel with wonderful speakers throughout the world, having my own voice. And that happened because of curiosity, and because of awareness, and because of access to the Eastern tradition, to Vajrayana Buddhism, that has done so much for me. And one thing that's coming to mind is back to how I guess what I was exposed to growing up as a young woman in Romania was this saying that men are from Mars, and women are from Venus. And it's such a hilarious thing, but it's very much real and manifesting today. And just to insert some more Jungian concepts, and also prefacing that I find complex is interesting. I'll have to come back to that, and let you know why I'm amused by this. Um, I find concepts as useful because they structure our thinking, and also getting in the way because they they create a split. So I want to speak about this idea of split, and that's really a complex in the Jungian school of thought. So um, again, Jung talks about the process of individuation, which means coming to accord and integrating psyche splits. He defines psyche as basically the unconscious. And I'll take one step back and say the unconscious, as I understand it, presented by Jung, is this everything, that the space that encompasses everything. And I think of the universe oftentimes. So I'm thinking about seeing constellations and galaxies, and seeing a lot, specks of light like stars. When you look out, let's say in the night sky, you see all of these constellations. And I think of the unconscious, the space without the stars, and I see myself having a headlamp, and I'm in this dark place, and all I can see is what that headlamp is allowing me to view because of the light that's generating. So if I look ahead of me, that is what I see. That's in my consciousness. If I move slightly to the right, that is my consciousness, and that's what I see. How I'm sure that you can relate to the fact that once you move to the right, you may forget what that consciousness from yesterday was. And so Jung talks about, again, the unconscious as this all-encompassing thing. I would say that Buddhism talks about this as being the space of emptiness and dependent arising. And the split happens when the split and so psyche, again, is a synonym for the unconscious, and split happens when we're getting triggered by something in such a way that we may even dissociate from it. I would say that this would be the equivalent of trauma in psychology. And so when that happens, we shun that part of ourselves in somewhere else. We don't want to see it. We can't connect with it. It's too painful. But that becomes this trigger, this activation that happens with us. So complexes, according to Jungians, are something that actually stay with you for life, which is something that I continue questioning because I believe in real healing. And so when we think about this dyad, male and female, I also see that as a split. And I want to now invite language, because really what we're talking about is these concepts that we built, and these naming conventions we give through language. And what language, I find, does, again, is helpful. It breaks things down, but I think it also gives us the impression that reality breaks down into things. And so a split, right? And yeah, I just wanted to offer kind of this, just reverberate on the topic of split, and complexes that Jung has to offer. So in the sense of his anima and animus as archetypes of the unconscious, they are projections that build onto the other. So we're externalizing what we think we're not capable of, or what we don't know about ourselves yet, and put it onto something else. I suppose for me, as a cisgender identified woman, a queer femme, as I evolve and consider about what my identity is, but starting as a cisgender woman, I suppose that would become um, my animus, right? Showing up in a dream, and I would project onto this masculine force because I'm looking to integrate some sort of split or complex within myself. Um, so these kind of things to play with, I suppose, if anybody would want to comment. And I also want to involve the audience if there's any curiosity. Would love to make this more relevant for them as well.
Thank you, Andrea, for kind of showing how you go about navigating your journey, trying to marry the learnings of from Vajrayana Buddhism with Jungian concepts. Uh, there's a very interesting comment from the audience. Women as dharma givers is a natural progression from women as caregivers. I think that kind of sums it up well. Um, just seems like a story in all of our lives that we kind of, once we have embraced, we kind of, our families also join in. I can speak for myself as well. That was a natural progression for me as well. So with that, I'd like to go on to Dr. Lydia on a slightly different track. uh, Dr. Lydia, new technologies have generated a lot of evidence that has shown that inherent differences in how men's and women's brains are wired and how they work differently. So, what is a neuroscientist's view on how the biology of the brain influences our behavior and feelings? So, and given that you are both a psychologist and a Buddhist practitioner, how do you really reconcile with these scientific investigations?
Well, thank you, Smita, for the question. That's a very big question. I'm a clinical psychologist, not a neuroscientist, not neuropsychologist, but we do definitely learn about the brain and its function, and gender differences. And that they're actually becoming disputed now. So we prior research was really focusing on differences between male and female brains. What isn't disputed is that the male brain is like about 11% bigger, but that doesn't mean more intelligent. It's just a biological thing that a male brain is bigger. But other than that, they used to say that women's corpus callosum, which is the area between the two hemispheres that sort of lets one hemisphere speak to the other, they said that this was more formed in women, or there were more connections. It was a stronger area, but now that's been disputed, and it seems that there are really more similarities and differences in terms of a brain and even how it functions. But that said, I think that there are huge differences in how men and women can see the world, and we've touched on some of them already. Like women's tendency to care for others is, some would say there are biological roots to that as well. So I don't know the details. I don't feel like I'm an expert enough to necessarily comment on this, but I've heard that some people would say that the sex steroid estrogen is associated with caregiving behaviors. But again, some of my research does look into estrogen around the time of menopause. And that's an example where, in common knowledge, people will often say that menopause can lead women to feel crazy, or it can lead women to really go, become very depressed or even paranoid or psychotic. And part of my research at the moment is to really look into the truth, into the facts behind this, and think, well, how does menopause actually, what does the data say in terms of how it impacts mental health? Because some people say, the estrogen levels are turbulent during the menopause and progesterone level goes down, then estrogen also goes down. So around this time, maybe these female hormones make women go crazy, basically. But really, I think that some of that is actually quite outdated thinking, based on the history of medicine and men beginning in the 1800s, sort of creating textbooks about the menopause, and from then it all became very medicalized. But now we've got this legacy of, the menopause makes you crazy. And so anyway, I'm probably talking, I don't know, I've probably gone off track a bit there. But to come back to, I guess, a Buddhist perspective, maybe I'll just talk, linking back to what Venerable Tenzin Dasel said about how having that kind of calmness or cool mind, I guess, ultimately an enlightened mind, can help us see the emotion of others with more clarity and more capacity to help, as opposed to be overwhelmed. I think that in my clinical work, so, people might come to me with PTSD, or they might have had a terrible trauma happen to them, or be very depressed or suicidal, men or women. And it could be a lot of suffering to kind of hold as a psychologist. And a lot of psychologists find it very overwhelming to hear that much suffering when they do counseling. So often when I meet with other psychologists, it's a common topic of conversation that, wow, there's so much suffering and I feel burnt out. But I think if you have a grounding in the Dharma, which says that suffering is normal, and actually it is where, like, the seed of the lotus is planted, and such a beautiful, beautiful kind of thing can arise right from in the middle of that suffering. And if you learn to relate to your suffering skillfully with mindfulness and with compassion, as the Buddha teaches, And if you learn to relate to other people's suffering in a similar way, wow, it's you don't get so burnt out as a psychologist. It's far easier to sit with somebody's pain because you know that is normal. It's a normal part of human life. And I wish that all psychologists could learn. They don't have to become Buddhist, but if they were to understand a little more about Buddhist understandings of suffering, I think therapists around the world would have a much easier time, and they wouldn't feel so burnt out at all.
That was very insightful, Dr. Lydia. I mean, Venerable Dasel, you wanted to chime in?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Lydia, for those comments. I just want to clarify a little bit on top of weaving through from what Sister Andreea was sharing and Dr. Lydia, that in Buddhism, suffering isn't really seen as normal. I mean, Buddha started with why do we suffer as the first noble truth, but where he's going to is that actually suffering isn't normal at all. You know, this is really important that we clarify between a secular view of samsaric confusion that's created from ignorance of not knowing the true nature of reality, that then arises a lot of attachment and desire based on what we perceive out there as very solid reality, and grasping onto emotions of difficult, strong emotions as very real identities of who we are, that then creates aversion and hatred and anger, and then creates an identity of ego or self that's prideful, that's conceptualized as conceited, or that's very low self-esteem. As Jetsuma Tenzin Palmo likes to say, the ego doesn't care if you hold it up high or you stomp it down low. Either way, you're feeding it. And then all this kind of confusion creates jealousy, envy. So Buddha looked at suffering as a first noble truth and said, suffering does arise. Then he diagnosed, why does suffering arise? Because we misperceive the true nature, which is our pure, beautiful, purified Buddha nature that is completely free of all this confusion, free of the poison of ignorance, free of the poison of attachment, free of the poison of hatred and anger, and free of all the other kinds of disturbed emotional states, that's shining without all these clouds covering it, all this dirt, all this pollution over it. Then he came to the third noble truth. Actually, our true nature is in nirvana. That's the true nature, is bliss. But how can we know that if we're not there yet? We have to get there. And then how do we get there? The fourth noble truth, follow the eightfold path. Understand what is right view, what is shunyata, what is tompani, what is emptiness or dependent arising, what is all the right mindfulness underneath, then how we're using right speech, right livelihood, right action, right intention for the benefit of all mother beings. So to put it back within a woman's psychology and Buddhist conversation, to share with these other perspectives from neurology, Jungianism, what Buddha was saying was actually none of this, all these concepts, all this way of perceiving the experience of reality, as long as we're still in a compounded, contaminated existence, meaning we have a very solid, heavy physical form, we have very contaminated emotional states. Until we come through those, we're going to take what might just be changing of reality. So, for example, Tripti's situation where that change was so sudden, her mind wasn't even cognitively processing it, but she was being held in a vessel where things helped it unfold nicely. But once the mind is purified, the mind is totally aware of every single thing that's going on without becoming reactive. Itself can be responsive. But her heart was so open to receive, she could do that nicely. And then through her training of the shamatha, helped her mind stay calm through all that. But with all these other concepts of duality or soul and animus and anima, I also studied these things. So I'm just going to speak on them very clearly. And my background is a master's in comparative theology and also other systems, is that as long as we're in duality, and Buddha called this the manifest and the unmanifest, as long as we can't see how things are manifesting beyond suffering into a non-abiding nirvana, we're stuck in confusion, what he called ignorance. We're stuck in the studying like the body and the neurology and the mind, a physical mind, looking for how things are lighting up and moving in a physical world. But that's not mind, that's brain. So we have to hold it very separately. We have to hold it very clearly that mind is something that's non-physical, that's fluid, that's beginningless, endless, primordially pure by its nature. If we look at neurology, it's changing all the time. As Dr. Lydia said, I was nodding because last year Jetsum and I were talking about that study where the bridge between the two halves of the brain is kind of shaped like a walnut, and we were just joking, like, okay, let's eat more walnuts, like, because it's going to change, and someone's going to study and say, oh, but that's not what we found. Well, maybe they were going into the study trying to look to disprove it. And we know through science subjectively, the world that we see is the world we're looking for. This was also the Buddha's great exploration, his great revelation was when we look for nirvana, when we look to the true deep nature, psychology and philosophically. So empirically through philosophy, we can prove what we're seeing. It's not just our feeling, not just our opinion, not just our concept of a psychology. We can hold it up through rationality, through empiricism, through philosophy. Then we can really clarify, very clear, sharply, the true nature of the reality, what it is, what's helpful, what it isn't, what's not helpful. So I just wanted to kind of bring it back and house it again within the Buddhist psychology. In the women Buddhist psychology, the female part really doesn't play that big of a role into it. If you look at the Abhidharma and if you look at the sutras, the mother of all Buddhas is wisdom. And female and male embodied beings can get to that wisdom equally. The Buddha himself said that. That's not my opinion. When his attendant Ananda was asking him, why won't you form the Bhikkhuni Sangha? Look, your stepmother's out there. Mahaprajna is out there. She's asking, please, she's with 500 women, the high women from the court. So they would have been probably very educated, being able to think for themselves. They wanted to follow the Buddha. Can't women become enlightened? And Buddha said, of course, yes, they can. Why? Because it's not our body, it's not our physical mind, it's not our neuroscience that gets enlightened, it's our mind. It's our mind. That's something that we have, we're using right now, our consciousness, our mind stream, but it's non-physical. So the best we can find through science and through looking is to see something's going on there. Oh, but look, it's changing all the time. And Buddha said, yes, that's how it is. But until we come up to knowing what's always the most beneficial, pure nature of mind, that primordially it's pure, it can never be corrupted. It's like a shining diamond. So our friend has that mind, our enemy has that mind, our neutral being has that mind, everything that lives has that mind. Insects have that mind, male identified people, cis identified people, female identified, the identities don't matter at all. What we're labeling on it. What matters is, are we in touch with its pure primordial nature of radiant clarity? That's what matters the most, just in the Buddhist psychology, to just ground it back there.
Yep. Thank you, Dasella. I think I would still like to summarize Dr. Lydia's, or kind of point out the fact that she's called out that it is hard on psychologists counseling people, or therapy, giving therapy to people is very hard on psychologists itself. And when she meets other psychologists, she does see that there is a lot of it's taking a toll on them as well, right? And the fact that she's able to probably understand the suffering better is coming from her grounding of Buddha Dharma. So I think that's a very useful part. I mean, everybody, like Tripti ji also alluded a little early on, is that everybody from the word go is not looking for ultimate enlightenment, probably, right? Or we are not having, we don't come to Dharma for the ultimate enlightenment. Our path starts with these little things in life, right? And that's where we seek solace or we seek comfort, and that's how the path opens up and it flourishes, right? So I think it's it's also important to acknowledge that while we say that we don't want to just practice dharma to make samsara comfortable, but that's where we start. I think that's where we start in making these small steps of, dealing with our problems in life, or dealing with our, you know, emotions, our own emotions in life. So, with that, I'll just go back to Tripti ji as a lay practitioner, and given that you have been educated in a modern education system, and I face this a lot. I've been a science student all my life, and there's always this tendency to corroborate everything that I learn in a Buddhist philosophy class. There's always some background process learning in how to rationalize it in scientific terms, or scientific studies. How do I explain this to myself or embrace it myself? Because, and for simple fact that we've been conditioned for so long to think in a particular way, right? So do you see that happening with you, or and where do you see how much of this is then you say, okay, you know what, I'll just take this for what it is, and there is an element of faith in there? Like, how do you balance the two?
Yeah, that's a really really great question, because I have worked all my life in the corporate world, and recently I've been thinking about the things that I'm learning on my journey and how they relate to the corporate world, right? And it came about very very simply when I was. It's sparked off. One easy one was actually wrote four words down. The first one was imprints. Okay. And I thought about that word imprints because I was thinking about how all of us are working from home, and I work in the technology, marketing, and advertising industry. And what happens is that when you start off working in this industry, most of your learning is by listening, right? So because you are not in every difficult situation that you're going to be in the future, you are in the situation that you're in right now, but you are listening to water cooler conversations between colleagues, you are listening to some senior person talk to a client and explain to them or defend the craft that we are working on. And I was thinking about how we are losing that in this in the COVID scenario, why everyone is working from their homes. And even when we are making contact, like right now, uh, there are five of us on the screen. None of you know who I'm talking to directly, right? I could be talking to you, Smita, or I could be talking to Jenla, or anybody, right? There is no contact. So the direction of where the learning is intended becomes diffused. At the same time, what we were listening to very intrinsically, without even trying, has gone, from the learning environment of the industry. And I thought about Buddhism, and I thought about the fact that when I'm doing my studies with Geshe-la and Smita ji, you are also, he keeps saying, if you don't understand what I'm saying, don't worry. It will leave an imprint in your mind. And when the appropriate time comes, you will understand it, right? So that was one theme that I was thinking about. Another theme I was thinking about was this word that we use all the time in Buddhism, which is about cultivation, right? It's such a powerful word. It's actually my favorite word in the English language, because it actually is talking about the fact that there is a muscle that you have not used, but if you keep using it and you keep using it, it will grow stronger and it'll help you in some way, right? So we talk about cultivating compassion, we talk about cultivating equanimity, but actually it's the same as any other muscle that we have, whether it's a brain muscle or it's a physical muscle, right? Another word that I thought about was about the fact that there are roles that we are all playing, right? I think, and I may confuse the issue a little bit here, but a woman is a role because actually the mind doesn't have a sex attached to it at all, as Jenla was saying earlier as well, right? We've been born as a man, a woman, an insect, a plant, I don't know about a plant, but, we've been born in so many different ways. And the continuity of our learning will keep going till we reach that ultimate goal, right? Now, the way there are almost two worlds that I live in that way, because I live in a very, very corporate world. I live in a world where capitalism and everything that it stands for abounds. I'm responsible for revenue targets. I have to drive numbers. We have to make money. And then I live in this other world, which is all about cultivating my Buddha nature. And there are such strong ties because you could relate your interpretation of one word with another very, very easily. And I think it's that journey that I'm on, and maybe some of the other people who are listening to this talk are on, where there is a higher purpose, but I don't know how many lifetimes that will take. I think the discovery of being of, and we have to go inside first to be able to come out. It's like in the aircrafts, they tell you put on your mask, oxygen mask first before you can pass it to your child. And it used to worry me, but I totally understand it now, because unless we can take care of ourselves and find ourselves in the best way possible, find that diamond that was referenced, there is no way we can spread what we have internally with us. So there is a practicality and a non-secular part that relates very, very deeply to the more spiritual part of what we are going through. Now, it's up to us whether we want to take that or not, and it's perfectly okay if at the end of, when I'm talking to younger people, I'm like, just watch your breath first. There's nothing religious about it. There is no spirituality. It's just a tool. And let's start with that.
Thank you so much, Tripti ji. Well articulated, and really, I think it's a good place to start the breath before we can go further into taking it on as to the ultimate purpose of discovering our Buddha nature. We have an interesting audience question at this point. I think we spoke a lot about women and compassion. So I would like to direct this question to Dr. Lydia. Kenneth asks, we talk a lot about male narcissism. Can you speak a little about female narcissism, especially when we saw portrayed by Hollywood celebrities such as, I think it's Jada, Will Smith's wife, and Amber, Johnny Depp's ex-wife. So what are your thoughts on that, and what are your comments? What would you say to Ken?
Oh goodness, that's a tough question. Narcissism is not an area that I specialize in, but it's kind of a narcissistic personality type sees themselves as better than other people. They're very self-focused. They may lack empathy. They may be quite charismatic, but very much self-focused and without really great understanding of other people's needs, which is not collaborative. And narcissistic people can do a lot of damage, actually. So if you have a narcissistic parent, that can cause a great deal of, of difficulty for the child. But narcissism really, I think that there's something very isolating if you're a narcissist. If you see yourself as being quite separate from other people, that would be a very lonely place. And often beneath a facade of confidence, deep down, a narcissist often feels very inadequate, inferior. And it's because of that suffering within them that they then need to dominate or sort of assert their place as being the center of the world, because they don't feel it. Whereas if you look at more enlightened beings or wise people who have taken a lot of time in their lives to cultivate their own mind, they don't need to really be a narcissist. It's not even necessary, because they feel whole, or more complete, more at peace within themselves. So female narcissism, I don't know about the gender difference in narcissism or narcissistic personality disorder. I'm not sure if men or women are more likely to have that. And I also am not really an expert on Hollywood things, but I know that, there was the episode at the... Yeah, look, I don't know if I can really comment on these particular women. But I think really narcissism comes from suffering. I, in a way, think that it can be healed, but often a narcissist might not be ready to heal because they lack that insight. And as they start to gain the insight, oh, hang on, the way I'm moving in the world isn't helping me, and it's not helping other people. As they start to build that insight already, and this is before they see a therapist, already they're they're overcoming their narcissism because they're starting to introspect. And then the next step down that track of healing will be that they come to therapy, but by then they're no longer a narcissist. So it's quite interesting that we don't see narcissists in therapy, because they lack the insight into what's going on for them. But some psychologists would say if you're a narcissist, it's part of your personality. That's just who you are. You are a self-centered person that lacks empathy. But from a Buddhist perspective, or I would agree from my perspective, something like narcissism can be healed, but it's a slow process potentially.
Thank you, Dr. Lydia. Kenneth, I hope that answered your question. We have a lot of audience questions at this point, so I'll ask my panel, would you want to take more questions at this point?
Smita?
Yeah, Dasel.
Just to summarize, I mean, the narcissist is all about me, so it's a total misperception of reality that the ego, it's all about me. Whereas in Buddhism, it's a selflessness. You're starting with the lack of an ego, but with a healthy sense of self that recognizes suffering is there, that something can be done, that we can change, that we can grow, that things are impermanent. So getting rid of what doesn't work, looking for what does work, opens us up much more. This is why the Buddha started with suffering, obviously. But for a narcissist, whether it's male or female or whatever, it's only about me, me, me. And so that's already the first misappropriated way of creating more suffering, which is, as Dr. Lydia said, why it would be harder to see them in therapy, because there's nothing wrong with me. It's everyone out there that's got the problem. And what Buddha is saying, no, actually, it's your own, whatever you're seeing out there. And if you're just attending to this sense of betterness or separation, this is the beginning of your misperception of reality. So this is why he's going towards selflessness, to this real, true, deep dependent arising, deep empty way that things come into being, both in form as well as in emotional states, as well as psychological states, as well as philosophical ideations of concepts. Sorry, just wanted to add that.
Thank you, Dasel. We have another question to Andreea from Go. What are shadow aspects that the movement of feminism are now facing? What's toxic feminism?
Thank you very much. I want to, if you've not seen this practice in Vajrayana Buddhism, I encourage you to look it up. I would welcome Venerable Tenzin Dasel to give me language for this, but it's the part where like nuns and monks go like this, and they toss questions at each other, and then they voraciously respond. So it's that debate spirit that I'm so glad we reached in this point, at this point of this conversation. And I also wanted to offer a brief reverberation on the fact that it's springtime and we have daffodils coming out, and narcissism is drawn from Narcissus, the myth of Narcissus, the name itself, which is this very beautiful man looking in the water and seeing his own reflection and falling in love with himself, and of course taking that to the extreme. So, interesting synchronicity there. We're quite aligned. It looks like, in what's quite timely in approaching this topic. So, I believe Kenneth may have been the one who shared the question. And Go, thank you for yours. So I did point out to shadow when I was saying that it's shadow is this part of yourself that is dissociated. You experience trauma in some way and you disconnect from it from a survival perspective. So then you find yourself being activated or triggered when you fall in a context or in a situation that may remind you of that. So you're going to be followed by that experience. A panic attack can be a really potent image here when your body, your mind may know that you're safe, but your body is responding in such a big way when you're not being chased by a lion, but you feel like you must run. May it be stage fright or whatever else. So, to your question, what are shadow aspects that feminism faces today? What is toxic femininity? So, this is quite relevant because we talk about toxic masculinity all the time. So, I certainly appreciate this question. What comes to mind is the times when women gained the right to vote. And at that time, there was a split, and because of the Black Lives Matter movement, this has been pointed out, where Black women have been left behind, where white women felt like it was important for them to promote their cause, and so for them at least to gain a right to vote. So in that sense, I would say that can be an aspect of toxic femininity within feminism itself, right? um, Today we talk about, I would say, it's a different age feminism. We started with people like Simone de Beauvoir is someone I look up to, and I studied in college. And she has this book called The Second Sex, Le Deuxième Sexe, where she points out to a lot of she is really playing the space of nature versus nurture that Dr. Brown was pointing to, and it's kind of come throughout the conversation. Where is it hardwiring or is it the education that we give women? And that way, feminism has transformed in so many ways. And today we talk about intersectional feminism that looks at bringing in many of the social torments. I guess I amuse myself using that, and it's quite an odd reaction, because these are very important, very serious things that we face, and at the same time, from a Buddhist perspective, they are simply concepts. They're more splits that we give ourselves, and in many ways complicate things. But then I would have people come to me and say, well, this is my reality. I am living in this body that's facing a lot of discrimination and so forth. So intersectional feminism is meant to bring all of that in and kind of look at things in a much more expansive and comprehensive way. Does toxic feminism exist today? I would say so. There it's quite easy to see radical movements, and radical being radical can be important. I've sat in so many conversations with Venerable Tenzin Dasel, where she speaks about radical love. Um, and certainly being radical today as a woman is important. I believe also Venerable was pointing out to the fact that when she goes and has retreats, the majority of the audience is female. So it's like when you're thirsty and you didn't have water and you have access to water, you want a lot of water. So in that sense, perhaps we take that to an extreme where maybe we take too much space. I can see that being possible. So I think it's and then kind of to try to wrap this up, I want to bring in the concept of paradox. Para and dox. Para, going above, and dox, like as in orthodoxy. So something that's a little more rigid and structured, and going above it. And now, of course, to mind comes the Prajnaparamita Sutra, which I will say is Om Gate Gate Parasam Gate Bodhisoha. Go beyond, go further beyond, go even further beyond until you reach enlightenment. So a lot of seeds there that I'm putting out. I suppose I do hope that helps go in some way. Thank you for the question.
Thank you, Andrea. We have a lot of audience questions coming in, so I think I'll take the next one to Dr. Lydia. Dr. Lydia, there is a difference between Western view of the mind and Buddhist view. How do you switch between these to understand and help people?
That's a great question. And when we talk about helping people, we're talking about an aspect of the mind which is suffering. So as psychologists, we come to people somebody who's suffering comes to us with anxiety or depression or trauma, and they're looking to heal from that suffering. And so I might just shift the question a bit because it helps me, is the Western view of suffering versus the Buddhist view, because that's really what a psychologist works with. We work with suffering. We work with minds, yes, but specifically we work with suffering. So I'm trained in cognitive behavior therapy, and a key idea in that therapy, which is commonly, widely used around the world, is like what they call the cognitive principle. And so a common sense idea of suffering is that, like, you walk down the street and you step in dog poo and the dog poo causes suffering. It's like, oh my God, that sucks. And you're really upset about it. And a common sense idea from a Western perspective is it's external. It's the dog poo's fault. Or if you're driving in traffic, it's the traffic's fault. So cognitive behavior therapy says it's not so much external events. It's more your interpretations. It's your thoughts, as well as emotions and feelings, especially thoughts in cognitive behavior therapy, CBT. So you step in dog poo and you think, oh my God, I've only just got out of bed and I've already started the day like this. How terrible. I can't believe it. What worse is going to come? Trust. I'm so unlucky. So you have all this negative dialogue, and that creates the suffering. Whereas somebody else might step in dog poo and be like, I stepped in dog poo. Okay, well, I guess I'll go and clean the dog poo up. And I think a Buddhist training really helps us to do that. So in cognitive behavior therapy, though, it's not a Buddhist training. It's more we help people understand their thinking and how their thinking might cause some of their suffering, how their interpretations, my husband left the glass on the sink again. Therefore, he doesn't care about me. I've told him that he shouldn't do that. I think, he just doesn't care. But again, that's all this kind of dialogue, this thinking dialogue. And so you sort of help people to kind of work through their thinking. But a Buddhist view, I think, takes it much further. CBT, in a way, talks about making samsara more pleasant, or, rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. It doesn't solve the fundamental problems of life, like aging and sickness and the fact that we'll all die and we'll lose everything that we've ever gained. CBT doesn't help with that really at all. And that's really where where CBT stops and a Buddhist path can take over. So to my mind, they're complementary. There's not like they're different, but CBT is sort of maybe a starting point if you've got clinical depression, anxiety. As you heal from that, then you can leave that aside and focus more on a Buddhist mental training, which allows you to reach greater subtlety, greater understanding of the nature of suffering.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lydia. I'll direct the next question to Tenzin Dasel. If you share one practice in one word with people today, what will it be?
Compassion. I think compassion meditation is the most important thing. In compassion, we could say loving kindness is part of compassion. So to start with yourself, as it was mentioned, that we have to start inwards. We have to start here, inside. We have to start here inwards with compassion and loving kindness and fill and imbue our heart minds. So when I say heart mind, I'm not talking now about the brain, and I'm not talking about the intellect. I'm not talking even about the concepts. I'm talking about your embodied knowing of the feelings of compassion and loving kindness. And a meditation to do that with is the 4 immeasurable qualities, or you can do a metta meditation. May I feel blissful. May I feel peaceful. May I feel happy. May I feel joyful. May I feel love. We have to start here. And you can, I saw this, I mentioned it before from Dr. Tara Brach, who's a Buddhist teacher here in the US and a therapist. She actually invites people to take their hands, because you bring in this kind of a somatic embodied feeling over the body and the heart center for people who have no spiritual practice, and just to say the words, but they can't feel anything. But when you really touch this part of your physical being, it's sometimes helpful. But starting with that compassion for your own experience, your own life is your teacher. So Buddhism is not happening just in retreats or in mindfulness, kind of quiet, separate meditation caves. Even a spider can sit in a cave for a long time, but 3 years in a silent meditation doesn't make you enlightened. Not at all. What you're doing within that 3 years or that 12 years or that how many years you're going to take of a practice to really cultivate those qualities of your mind, that's what's going to bring out your own embodiment of them. So we always have to start with our own experience with compassion and loving kindness. And often, as it's been mentioned, it is our own suffering, our own confusion that brings us to look for help, whether it's through Western cognitive therapy or Buddhist practice. But we can take many directions. But the point is that we need to start with the compassion, recognizing that just like I don't want suffering, nothing that lives wants suffering. Whether it's a little insect, whether it's an animal, whether it's a bird or a fish, of course, other human beings. When we drop all the labels of gender and nationality and religion, we come down to the fact that everything that lives wants happiness and does not want suffering. Every healthy form of life. It doesn't mean everything living right now is aware of that. There's a lot of living beings right now that are just going more and more into the confusion and into some kind of a nihilism or it doesn't matter kind of attitude because they're so overwhelmed by the suffering. But that's not going to bring the end to suffering, obviously. So it's not nihilism because something is here. We do have a body. We are speaking. We are part of a great, amazing process of life. But it's not eternalism either. So things can change. So when suffering comes, we start with compassion. We start with loving kindness. We can acknowledge our experience, but we don't stay there. We transform it. But still, and yet, may I be blissful. May I be peaceful. May I be happy. May I have joy. May I have loving kindness. Because when I am able to touch and feel all those things, no matter what arises, my mind is open through those very positive emotional states. And in Buddhism, we train also in the other side of the equation, which is wisdom. Then may I have the wisdom to see that all things are in the nature of change. Things that come into this world that have bodies are going to leave these bodies. So I don't cling. I start to understand and accept that as I'm born and changing and living, one day also I'm going to change again and take another kind of an appearance, so that we get used to this concept that things are not static and always one way. That creates a lot of space for the wisdom of the view, as Sister Andreea said. We call it the mother of all Buddhas is Prajnaparamita, the great perfection of wisdom. She's called the mother of the Buddhas. And Aryatara has this mother of all Buddhas too, because Aryatara's also carrying the flaming sword of wisdom, which is all-accomplishing wisdom of karmic perfection. And when the mind is clean, clear all the way up to that level, then there's no more suffering. I know people don't believe in it because sometimes we identify who would I be without the suffering? But believe me, you'll be much happier. It doesn't make the world change, and the suffering in the world is still going to be there, but you're going to be much more effective in being able to handle that. So start with your compassion. Now to the point of in schools in India, over 5,000 schools are teaching social emotional learning. His Holiness the Dalai Lama has been inculcating seeds of this curriculum throughout India. I myself, starting Maine Mindfulness Project here in Maine and USA, have been teaching different parts of the country. We've also gone into many schools here that are now number one priority in the school system where Tashi Getzeling is here in Gray for this school year was social emotional learning, prioritized even over academics because of the effect of COVID. So this is also where we can see in the midst of tragedy, in the midst of the crisis of COVID, a pearl came that compassion is becoming much more essential. Our happiness is much more essential than our intellectual book knowledge. You can know everything. You could be a genius and still be a miserable person. So start with the wisdom. What's the nature of reality? Happiness matters. Compassion matters. Interconnection matters. We have to find that within and then start to plant these seeds so everyone can find. Then what kind of world can we live in? Wonderful.
Thank you, Dasela. Andrea, there's one question that's directed to you. We have been born both as males and females in our previous births and carry imprints on those lifetimes in our mind stream. Certain conditions can trigger certain responses which could be perceived as being overly masculine or feminine. Is this same as anima or animus that Jung talks about?
When Jung references anima and animus, again, these are archetypes that are pertaining to the unconscious, so this vast space. And so according to Jung, the animus and anima are these ancient collective energies and forces called archetypes. So beyond, you have the great mother, you have the great father, you have the victim, you have the hero. There's a myriad of archetypes that are being observed in many cultures and traditions. This is not Jung making this up, but he I think he is most known for leveraging this concept of archetypes. So the divine feminine and masculine, that way he brings forth as the anima and animus. So I would say that we pull from these energies like we would do from Buddhism, pulling, trying to go back or claim source, this force that is not birthed, nor is it nor has an end, achieving enlightenment. So in that sense, it's beautiful to pull back the layers and try to see, I suppose, from a historical perspective, what is there and what can be seen. Many people refer to this place as the Akashic records. There's just so many ways of labeling it, I suppose. Another thing that comes to mind that's more concrete and we can go back to is the archaeological site in Turkey, Göbekli Tepe, where we see myriad of cultures being depicted there in stone engravings, and this is one of the oldest sites that we know of. So how is that possible? So again, this kind of like hive mind space that we have access to and we can tap into is what Jung refers to as the animus and anima, these ancient archetypes. I hope that helps.
Thank you, Andrea. There's a question for Tripti ji, interesting one at that. Is it difficult to wield authority at work after you understand the Buddhist view? And in fact, I would like to add to that is, do you find it difficult, you know, uh, balancing compassion and authority at work?
That's a great question. Um, I'm going to rephrase that question to interchange the word authority with leadership. Authority is a byproduct of great leadership, because if you're a great leader, you automatically wield authority because people follow you, which sounds like authority, really. And I think leadership is about a lot of different things. It's about the right kind of judgment, which is tempered by wisdom, right? People follow people who they put admire, who they want to emulate, who they want to be like, whose decisions they think are appropriate. Okay. I think you become so much more wise and therefore so much of a better leader from the things that you learn from Buddhism, because you're able to see things as they are, but not just for yourself. Because everyone is the hero of their own life, and they look. I think Andrea was talking about moving the spotlight, one direction, and that's the reality. Then you move it there, and that's the reality. But you realize I realized, I don't want to generalize for everybody. I realized from my learning that actually, just as I'm the hero of my life, if I could go inside the body of every other person who was around me, I would see a different world, which was their reality, right? And that's such a powerful thing, because you can go into the other person's point of view and you can understand them. And understanding leads to better decision making. When you understand other people's point of view, you just make a better judgment of the rightness, considering the larger good. I feel that leadership tempered with wisdom automatically makes you easier to be followed, gives you better authority. So no, it's not difficult at all. It's much easier if you're studying the path to lead.
Thank you so much, Tripti ji. I like how you put it, and how wisdom will only enhance your leadership, and probably make you a better leader as well. Um, Dasila, you wanted to add something there?
Well, I just love that earlier Tripti talked about cultivation as her favorite word, and Dr. Lydia used the word. And, we always talk about cultivating the qualities on the path. So we're cultivating our path, but we're cultivating these positive psychological qualities that are going to bring out the fruition of the path. So these are kind of like the seed is already in us. The Buddha nature and seed of the awakened mind is already there beyond conceptuality. The Buddha was infamously said, I use concepts, however, I'm not fooled by them. So that's where he's really starting from, but he's going to use them in ways that are going to be applicable, to 84,000 different kinds of teachings, to be able to help to benefit anyone who comes in contact with them. But as Tripti ji was saying, like, cultivation means, I used to be an organic farmer, before this appearance here in Maine for many years, almost a decade. And before you begin to really try to nurture the seed or put it in the ground, you take care of the ground that you're planting in. So when we're practicing, we're looking at our life saying, wow, we've got a human birth. How amazing. That's a precious opportunity. And then we can start to look at and say, well, how can I prepare to make the most of this life? Of course, to bring the best happiness out. And it doesn't, of course, as everyone mentioned, doesn't mean at all that you have to become a Buddhist or a monastic or anything in particular, but taking good care of your precious human mind, meaning what are we going to put into our mind that's going to only bring benefit to oneself and to everyone else. So taking care of what is going to bring these beautiful qualities of contentment, happiness, peace, compassion, joy, wisdom. By nurturing our own environment, we're cultivating that kind of a mind. And everyone can do this in their own paradigm to a sense, but remembering that mind is already primordially pure, like a pure diamond. And all we have to do to start to prepare the ground is start to move out some of the weeds that are in the mind, some of the things that don't help it to flourish, and then cultivating by nurturing, putting in things that do. So bringing in the sunshine, bringing in the waters, taking good care every day, taking good care, more importantly, even of the mind than of what kind of organic foods we're eating or being vegan or things like this or all these political identities. What's really bringing out the pure light, clear light nature of mind that really is peace beyond concepts. Peace that one of my Dharma, my elder friend here says, peace that passes understanding. So we can really go somewhere new. But I just wanted to really agree with this concept of nurturing, being and cultivation of the qualities on the path and the wisdom of identifying psychologically which aspects really serve us into our own happiness, nurture our own happiness, our peace of mind, our compassion, our joy, our bliss, sorrowless bliss. I mean, who doesn't want that? And you're not going to get it by needing to take psychedelic things or substances outside of yourself. It's already in there. Just dig in, and the path takes work. It takes cultivation. Everything that we do takes practice. So that's why we call our Buddhism our practice. But what we're doing actually is we're practicing cultivating this clear light mind. This is the psychology of the Buddhist path. And for women, we have a great opportunity now to take that compassionate, wise nature and continuing to put ourselves into that position, as Tripti said, as a leader from within our own locus of the middle of our own heart, and let everything else come up around us, leading from within. So I really rejoice, Tripti and Dr. Lydia G and Smita G and Andreea G, because being a lay practitioner, and many of you being in partnership or mothers, some of you mothers, I mean, all these different dynamics that can be opportunities for wonderful practice, but certainly are quite different than the path that I'm on as a female monastic, which brings its own challenges, of course. But, we can learn in whatever appearance we're in how to bring out the best aspects of practice. And for all of you who are watching who have no path and are just listening and wondering, then the main thing is find out what brings your happiness, in the sense of your happiness being equal to the happiness of others, and try to bring out and cultivate those qualities. Use everything as your practice.
Thank you so much, Dasel. Dr. Lydia, if you want to give your closing comments for today's conversation.
Well, I think these are my closing comments, in that, let's just focus on cultivating for ourselves, instead of always being so concerned about how much water we've taken every day and how much food we've eaten or what kind of politic identity or gender identity. Let's just think about consuming in our conscious mind, in our conscious heart mind, more essence, more deliciousness of loving kindness, altruistically, selflessly, more deliciousness, altruistic compassion, selflessly, beginning here in our heart, but then just radiating it out like a sun, reflecting it out to everybody. More joy in the simplicities. Andreea mentioned the flowers, the moonlight, the wonder, just starting with some kind of appearances that make us happy. Again, in Buddhism, we go somewhere else entirely, but let's just talk about it in a secular way of finding just simplicity, the wonder of the simplicity, and then spreading that with equanimity equally, that everybody is part of this journey that we're here with. And that transcends everyone's happiness collectively as the oneness of humanity. To go back to what His Holiness said, the oneness of humanity is the most important thing these days. And that means beyond any kind of differences, to see that we share this wish for happiness. And let us, each of us, cultivate our universal love and make these contributions through our wisdom, through our compassion. I'm sure we can do it. I'm sure this is what we're here for right now, in this very moment that we're here to do this. And I really rejoice in all my sisters, brothers, fur friends, feather friends, scaled friends, non-binary friends, whomever you are. I love life, and I hope you do too. And if you don't, then keep looking for ways to love it more, because it will love you back. It won't be always easy, but through those hard parts, you will grow the best and you'll become the happiest because you'll know your true diamond essence of being able to shine, not just for your own happiness, but especially shining and reflecting in all that beauty that's come to you that you're just giving right back. May
Thank
we
you,
all have that. May we all have the ultimate happiness of full awakening.
Thank you, Dasela. Dr. Lydia, you wanted to give in some closing comments for today's conversation?
Look, I think it's been such a rich conversation. I have nothing more to add other than just to remind everybody of that wonderful comment from the audience that said that women are natural caregivers, and an obvious extension of that is to become Dharma teachers and to use our strength for caring for others, and our strength for communicating, and our strength for collaborating and connecting with others. If we can use this in a Dharma setting, what a wonderful generation of Buddhist leaders there would be. So thank you for that comment, and thank you to all the moderators for such a rich conversation this evening in Australia.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Lydia. Andreea, what do you want to say wrapping up this conversation for today? And I know we had more questions for you lined up. We will take that up in a part 3 of this conversation. So you'll be coming back for that again. But for closing today's conversation, what would you want to say?
It's quite hard to follow after the inspirational shares from Venerable Tenzin Dasel and Dr. Brown, and I'm sure Sister Tripti as well. My addition is to my generation specifically, and to the new generation coming up, around the creating space for oneself and investigating. The metaphor of the sharp sword was used. That's been very helpful for me, and bringing curiosity and humor, and levity to the investigation, where we try to better understand our own projections and what we externalize. So back to, I guess, another piggybacking on the invitation of building a resilient internal locus of control, where we focus inwardly, we look to understand ourselves, and put ourselves in situations that help us mirror and gain more insight. Being aware of being aware is the point. So an invitation to find ways without taking it too seriously, because I think that goes, if you're not having fun, if there's no joy there, it's not going to stick. And thank you all. What a beautiful conversation.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Tripti ji, any final words?
I really am so grateful to be here. And I think the imprints of everything that we've heard in the last hour and a half, almost 2 hours, they will stay, they will linger. I don't think any of us should worry too much about, getting there. It will happen in its own time. Let's all just be present in the now, and look inside, and everything is there already. What we need is here right now with us. The rest will follow.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you so much for summarizing that so well. Thank you, Tripti ji. Thank you, Dr. Lydia, for staying up so late. I know it's really late in Australia. Thank you, Andreea and Venerable Dasel, coming in so early in the morning. You guys really went out of your way to be up early and make this conversation so fruitful with all your valuable thoughts. And you can see from the audience response that they really enjoy the conversations, very rich. And we really look forward to having a part 3 on this, because I think the topics are so deep and so vast that doing justice to it in one conversation seems like a very tough thing to do. I when I write through the script and I'm thinking I need to ask this too and that too, and then you're trying to bring it down to a small set of questions. But yeah, we shall have another part on 29th May, and you'll see an announcement on the FB page soon. And with that, we welcome Samiksha to close out this session.
Yes. Thank you for that wonderful, insightful discussion. We had very wonderful. It's very beautiful, and I really thank each one of you for your time. It's really amazing to have you on the as a panelist tonight. And okay, I really thank Venerable Tenzin Dasel, Tripti ji, Sister Andrea, and for very beautiful moderation tonight, Smita ji. Okay, so I really thank our audience tonight because they have had very insightful questions and we have very well answer to them. It's really nice. Like it was a very engaging discussion tonight. Okay, so now I'm going to announce one upcoming event and then we are going to wrap up this discussion with a short dedication prayer. We are going to have next one event on 9th May, which is our part of our daily Dharma series, Mistaken Views and Misconceptions about Buddhism. This will be our part of 4. The contributors will be Ben Mitriu, Dr. Giuliano, and Vivek Sharma. These are all scholars. The moderator will be Ram Narula, who is going to moderate the discussion. So please, our audience, to join with this discussion also. After this, may I invite Venerable Tenzin Dasel for a short dedication prayer.
Gangriwa we corporation come dear pendang dewa malu changwe ne chenrezi wan tenzin getsoe shapezi te bardu ten gyorchi jangchup sam chok rinpoche ma ke pa nam ke gyorchi ke par nyam par me par yang gone gondu pelwar shog. In English that sounds like this: in that snow mountain encircled land, source of every benefit and joy, may Lord Tenzin Gyatso Chenrezi remain in life till samsara's end. Bodhi mind, precious and sublime, may it arise where it has not arisen, and where it has arisen, may it flourish and grow forevermore.
Sister Andrea.
Because today is Orthodox Easter and my family is celebrating, I would love to share a prayer in my native language to honor this event. Hristos a înviat din morți, cu moartea pe moarte călcând, și celor din morminte viață dăruindu-le. Thank you.
Thank you. Tripti ji.
May the merit of this time that we have spent together go towards the long life of all our venerable teachers, all teachers of every kind, and especially for the long life of His Highness, the Dalai Lama, so we can continue to benefit from his guidance.
Thank you. Thank you, Tripti ji. Smita ji.
I dedicate all these roots of virtue with the dedication praised as the best by all the Buddhas who appeared in 3 times, so that I might perform the noble Bodhisattva deeds. May the supreme Bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow, and may that which has arisen not diminish but increase forevermore. As long as space remains, as long as sentient beings remain, until then may I too remain to dispel the miseries of the world.
Thank you. Okay, let me do this English prayer. The 4 great vows. Sentient beings are numberless. We vow to serve them all. Delusions are endless. We vow to cut through them all. The teachings are infinite. We vow to learn them all. The Buddha way is inconceivable. We vow to attain it. May all beings be well, happy, and safe. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you to Brother Chang and to Sherab and all the Sattva team for providing this precious opportunity to share in the Dharma.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye, everyone.